So, what I thought I'd do today is talk a little bit about what the New York Times is doing in this kind of post-advertising era, and try to also kind of relate it to people in the crowd. I know the New York Times stands in a unique position, but I do think there are things we're doing that can apply to more people beyond the Times. And for me, I think just to say what I think of as post-advertising, the business model for journalism used to be one where we created journalism, we aggregated an audience, and then advertisers paid for access to that audience to buy ads. And so, basically, the monetization was indirect. The journalism wasn't actually driving the revenue, the audience was. And I think, to Jim's point earlier about Google and Facebook, they've essentially, aggregated the entire US audience, world audiences in places, and can offer targeting at scale. And I think that's, to me, what post-advertising means, which is that fundamental business model that was in place before doesn't exist the way it did before. And so the question is, what do you do about it? So for me, these are kind of the three takeaways that I would hit with this group, which is that you start with the end user first. It sounds simple enough, but if you're thinking about the reader, what is journalism that's worth paying for? It's not, I like Jim's comment about, it's not advertisers, it's marketers. What do they really value? Second, that the journalism and the business model are connected. You can't, separate them. If you're going to go and do an activity and engage with readers, you need to think about how that's going to translate to revenue. And same thing with marketers. And then last, that reader trust is the foundation for long-term success. It sounds obvious, but it's always worth saying in this new world as we go into this. The best decisions put the reader first, and those decisions pay off in the long term. So, with the Times. In 2015, we released a document called Our Path Forward. I don't know how many of you have read it, but it basically said we're a subscription business first. And even kind of, I think, in a sharper sort of way, there was a statement that said, we're in the business of creating journalism worth paying for. It actually literally connected the journalism and the business model into one line. And these things, on the right, these headlines are just examples of the type of journalism that, are worth paying for. And I think, it's easy to say, okay, we're going to start charging and, of course, people will start paying because we have great journalism, but it is really worth thinking, what are the things that matter to people? As Sarah was talking about, what is it that the community values? It's original reporting, it's the right investigative work, it's trusted voices. For us, continually reimagining storytelling and visual journalism. These are all the kinds of things that we believe are worth paying for, and where the Times is increasingly putting our focus in terms of building our audience. And some of you may have heard that this has translated to us in the past year $1 billion in consumer revenue across print and digital. And I'll also just say for this group, I think that subscription revenue and reader revenue is the foundation for the news business moving forward, but I also don't think it's the only revenue stream. Once again, that comment of it's not advertisers, it's marketers. Starting with a marketer, actually, Jim included a quote from a colleague, Seb Tomich, who heads the advertising sales group at the Times. But actually starting with a marketer and saying, what is it that they value? Before, we didn't really need to ask that. We just said, we have these ads. Who wants to buy them? They're next to our media. Now we've got to say, hey, what is it that you're trying to achieve? And then work backwards. For us at the Times, that's led to thinking about different kind of formats. Up here on the left-hand side, we developed a flex frame unit, but that wasn't enough. We also wanted to go and say, hey, how do we help marketers create ads just as high quality as our journalism? So we actually went and created T-Brand Studios. But beyond that, we're also thinking about different ways that we can create great journalistic experiences for our readers, but also help our marketers. So one thing that we did here was the Daily 360, where we partnered with Samsung. They provided the technology, and we actually did 360 videos every day for a year going around the world. And so we're continually thinking about what are the different things that we can be doing that are good for our readers and good for our marketers. So one other thing to think about is that, oftentimes I think we equate journalism with news, but actually journalism can be more than just news. Journalism to me is great reporting. And in 2013, I started the new product division at the Times. At the time, we were a subscription business, and we thought, hey, let's create a series of niche news products. And we created NYT Now, NYT Opinion, Cooking, Crosswords. Some of you hopefully know those products or have used them. And when we were doing cooking, we had this really interesting moment because we said, okay, well, cooking, we'll just go and we'll take our great food coverage and recipes and we'll go put it into a publication online. But actually, we started with the reader because we knew if we were going to actually charge for this, people had to be willing to pay for it. We couldn't just put it online and then slap a price onto it. And when we started with the reader, we actually worked backwards. We said, you know what? They actually don't want just another food publication. They want help with figuring out what to cook and managing the recipes and knowing what other readers are having to say about those recipes. And that led us to create Cooking, which you see up there is What to Cook and Crosswords. Together, Cooking and Crosswords today have about, well, as of last publicly reported numbers, 415,000 subscribers. But even more importantly, they're part of a bundle, this larger bundle that is the New York Times. And I think one of the realizations that we had while we did this too is that newspapers, as I said, were actually about more than about news. I think when we made this transition from print to digital, we said, okay, we're a newspaper company, we'll drop the paper, and now we're a news company. But the reality is that newspapers always played a much bigger role in our readers' lives. They were kind of a central place of gathering information for communities and readers. And some of those things aren't coming back, like classifieds. But we realized that there are a bunch of different needs that the New York Times could fulfill for our readers. What to cook, what to play, which was crosswords. We launched a watching product that exists and has been successful. How to be healthy is our wellness vertical. It's not really a standalone product, but we've done a lot of innovation. And one of those things was what to buy. And we thought, okay, why don't we go and find these other reader needs that we can actually support our audience in? And with what to buy, we actually said, okay, well, should we build this or should we buy it? And as it turned out, Wirecutter existed. And it was kind of talking within the company in the newsroom, we said, hey, this is the thing that actually we'd build if we had the time to do it. Let's have this conversation about whether it makes sense to acquire. So we acquired Wirecutter. And for those of you who have not used it, actually just quick show of hands, who here has ever used Wirecutter before? Okay. Many more people should be using it, but I'm not here to pitch Wirecutter. Basically what it is, it's a product recommendation site. So you say, I want to figure out what cordless stick vacuum to buy. You actually go, we say, we've done a ton of research, we've looked at all these models, we think this is the best pick for most people. If you're on a budget, here's a budget pick. If you really, really care about this specific thing you're looking to own for years and years and years, this is the upgrade pick. And I think for us, what we did is we started with the reader. We knew that this was a real reader need out there. People wanted actionable advice to make decisions. And for Wirecutter and for the Times, we felt like it was at a quality worth paying for. It's deeply investigative reported pieces. Oftentimes takes 12 weeks to actually get to the place where we make a recommendation. We think about real-world testing, not in the lab testing. We think about actually what the reader needs are and not championing and heroing products. And in this case, though, from a monetization model standpoint, we didn't just assume we're going to slap ads on or we're going to slap a subscription on. We had to be really thoughtful and said, this is a transactional model. We're helping people make decisions. And this isn't about an advertising solution, but there is a marketing solution here, affiliate revenue, performance revenue, where we can bring those two things together. And so that's kind of where we've landed with Wirecutter. And across all of these things, they're seeded throughout the New York Times as a way to discover these new products and vice versa. And so we see this as an ecosystem and a portfolio. So just to recap, understand what your readers and marketers truly care about. You've got to build experiences that are actually truly differentiated in the digital world. The competition is just one click away. And if it's just as good and free or better, they're not going to be coming to you. And then think about what that right connection is with the monetization strategy. So with that, turn it over to Jim.